Hey, everybody. Another week of Howling with the Wolf. Giving you guys a little insight on the Titans before I head out to practice. So, as always, fire away your questions. I'll start off with a little intro and we'll get it going. 8-4 Titans. They are really good spot to win the playoffs. I mean, I'm not sure how much suffering you guys have had for Titans fans, but has to be a good feeling for a team that is going to do something it hasn't done in a decade, barring any collapse. So I think there should be a lot of good feelings about this team. A lot of question marks as always, but I think that the focus should be on this next West Coast trip and gearing up for what could be a really exciting December and January. So I wrote an article on ESPN.com this morning on Titans coach Mike Mularkey and why I believe he deserves more love from the fan base, more love from the national media, more love in general, just because of the winning. And I know it's not the prettiest way. I know Tony Dungy called it a dump truck team, and you know there are some elements of that are accurate. But I think that the winning element, if that's truly what's still important in the NFL and the number one priority, he has done that in his third coaching stop. He had failed in his first two stops, and his third stop he's doing a pretty good job having the Titans at 8-4, 17-11 since the start of 2016, and going to make the playoffs. So check that out if you guys want to see what I'm talking about there. I think this is a very intriguing game because I think Arizona is a decent team. I think this is a team that can sneak up and beat the Titans. So this is a game where the Titans will have to be on their P's and Q's, and this will be a game probably like the other games where it'll be tight, fourth quarter contests where the offense or defense needs to step up and make a play at the end. So I'm intrigued to see how they respond to this one. I think if they find a way to win this one, it almost assuredly locks up whether a AFC South position or a wild card spot. So I think this is a really important game. They've got Arizona, and then they'll be staying in Arizona for the week after and going to San Francisco the week after, so they don't have to make two West Coast trips. So those two West Coast trips will be difficult. This is one of their more difficult periods of the season as far as the West Coast travel and being on that time frame at this time of the year with two teams who are actually probably playing some of their best football of the season, even if their record doesn't reflect that. You know, the Cardinals, who have surprisingly been pretty decent with Blaine Gabbert at quarterback, and the 49ers, who have Jimmy G, and they look like a different team when I think they've won two of their last three. So neither of these games are going to be cupcakes, and then obviously the last two against the Rams and the Jaguars here in Nashville will be exciting as well. So I think we'll learn a lot about this Titans team over this last four games, but I think what you'll learn is a lot of who they already have shown to be. And I think I wrote an article after last week's game saying this is who the Titans are. You know, they're resilient, they're flawed, but they're likely a playoff team. And I think it's all based on circumstance and expectations, how you view this team. Yes, there is a better than decent chance that this team won't win the Super Bowl, but 31 other teams won't win the Super Bowl. Can you consider a season a success without a Super Bowl title? I think, from my perspective, for this organization, you can. I think if you make the playoffs, and winning a playoff game would be great, but even making the playoffs, I think, is a successful year given where they've come from and being a 2-14 team, being a 3-13 team, and then going from 9-7 and then possibly 10-6, 11-5 this season, and a potential playoff team. I think that would be considered a success, in my opinion. So I think there is a lot to be excited about for this team in the long term. Lewis, let's get to the questions. Lewis, do we need to be concerned that Savage threw for over 300 yards on us? I mean, it depends on what you consider concern. I think there are elements of the secondary that will still bend quite a bit. I think the bend but don't break element is very appropriate for this team, this defense, because you look at Savage, and I think he had like 365 yards, which is ridiculous for a backup quarterback, right? But the Texans had 13 points. So, you play the game for points. So I think that it's concerning maybe against better quarterbacks because they'll be able to make some of those bigger plays and they'll be able to create some of those elements into touchdowns instead of field goals. But I don't necessarily think the yardage is a conduit to say that this defense is in trouble. I think that they aren't some elite defense by any stretch of the imagination. There's still a lot of young talent on the back end, and I think that there are teams that are going to be able to beat them because of their youth and experience in the back end. But I also think there was some conservative play because of how DeAndre Hopkins beat them. DeAndre Hopkins destroyed them in the first week. Will Fuller did too. So their big concerted effort was to take away the big play. So in turn, you give up a lot of those 5, 10, 15-yard routes underneath, and adding those up lead to the yardage total that Savage had. So I think sometimes you have to pick your poison. Do you want to play tight D and potentially get beat on the back end, or do you want to give up some things and have a big yardage total but not give up a lot of points? And I think they chose correctly in choosing the latter. So they're not a team right now that can say, hey, we're going to man up and our guy's better than your guy all the time. Maybe they'll get there, but they're not there yet. So they're choosing and picking their poison. And I think Dick LeBeau did a really good job of choosing how they can be as far as their conservative play and when to bring up the heat. And I think their pass rush, although it wasn't consistent, turned up the heat sort of at the right time. Is there any feel on how ownership feels about the coaching staff? Any way you don't see the current staff back next year? I think ownership is happy with the coaching staff. I know that Amy Adams Strunk does love Mike Mularkey and what he brings to this football team, and I think nothing they've shown this season would do anything to show otherwise. I think they're 8-4 is at least at expectations, regardless of what you think as far as the on-play performance and how they look visually. I think as far as the winning, which, like I mentioned earlier, if that's still priority number one, then you're 8-4, which is a step forward from where you were at this point last season. So I think that there would be no reason, I don't think, that the coaching staff would be back unless there was a big shakeup in the front office or they really need a desire towards change, or for whatever reason the Titans collapsed and lost all 4 games down the stretch. Those are probably the only possible scenarios. We did a thing on ESPN. You guys can check that out yesterday, where we rated the job security of every head coach in the NFL. And the scale was 1 to 5. And 1 being a cold seat, nothing will ever make them go. And a 5 being that you might want to pack your bags. And I put Mike Mularkey as a 2. And there was only like 6 or 7 other coaches that were below him, and I think 2 is it was called a cool seat. And basically what the cool seat is saying that, hey, this guy is very nearly safe barring some type of drastic disaster. And I think the fact that Mike Mularkey's in year 2 of a 3-year contract is the only area where you're like, okay, it's not a guarantee, because this is usually an area where you decide, okay, are we going to extend the coach? NFL teams don't like to go into lame duck periods with their head coaches. So I think there is it's a lot more likely that Mike Mularkey will get an extension this offseason than anything else happening. Let's see. Yeah, I agree. They were giving those exactly what I was talking about, the 5 or 10 yard throws to stop the deep ball, and they were very successful. I think there was one big play where they busted the coverage, and I think it was Braxton Miller who got free, and it was just a busted coverage. Other than that, there wasn't many 30, 40-yard big plays. So I think that was part of the game plan, that, hey, we're going to give up some stuff to them. Maybe they gave up more than they expected, particularly on that 4th and 19 late in the game. They didn't intend to give that up. But I think that for the most part, they executed what they were trying to do, despite the big passing game numbers. Sean's asking, 29 seemed to have some extra juice and ran more decisively and confidently. Did he indicate if he was simply feeling better, or was it trusting his vision? I think priority number one was the offensive line played better. And if you guys have been watching these broadcasts that I do with you guys, you know that I was sort of challenging, and Mike Mularkey, I'm sure, challenged the offensive line that, hey, this is a unit that's supposed to be the core of our offense, the core of our team. And they weren't playing like that for much of the season coming into it. But they had a really good day up front, and they created a lot more lanes for him. I do agree that he had more bursts. He wouldn't admit it. He said that he was just trusting his blockers. He kind of gave the PC answer. But it did look like he had more bursts. I'm not sure if he felt more confident because he saw the lanes, or if he felt if he felt better because of health purposes, because he's been dealing with those hammies all year. So maybe he's feeling a little bit better, health reasons. He didn't give us that insight, but I did notice that he looked better as a runner, probably the best I've seen him in about 2 months running the football, which is a good sign. If you get more of that going forward in combination with Derrick Henry, you get more of the 198-yard rushing days like you had against Houston, and less of the sub 100-yard games that you had so often the previous weeks. So it's just one game, so I don't want to overreact and say that he's back to his normal vision. But if he starts continuing that pattern, then that bodes well for the Titans as they get into playoff season. Josh is saying, winning is number one. However, if Jacksonville gets a new quarterback and Watson comes back, I don't think we'll be as fortunate. I really need to take a step forward in different offensive philosophy. Yeah, Josh, I think a lot of fans may have your different perspective. And, you guys have every right to have whatever vision of this team as you want to. That's why, fans are great fans, because everybody has different perspectives on how they want to see this team run. Everybody has different perspectives on how the vision of success is, but ultimately the team makes those decisions. So I think that a large period of the fan base would say, yeah, we need a more exciting offensive philosophy, but this is Mike Mularkey's philosophy. And I doubt that he's going to completely flip the script because people are calling him boring. In fact, earlier today, he responded to Tony Dungy's dump truck reference to say, hey, if it means that we're boring and we're low to handle, then I'm okay with that. So I don't think he feels there's a problem with having a boring offense, except maybe it's more difficult for you and I to watch. But, it's the NFL. I think I wrote earlier today that in my article on Mike Mularkey, that this isn't the BCS system or the college football playoff. You don't get style points for winning by 30 points versus 3 points. You don't get style points for running, 400 yards passing attack. Yes, there are some elements of Marcus Mariota's game where you would like to see more of him. Yes, the offense probably could be more explosive, but there is an element that they've been really successful running the ball and stopping the run, and the numbers don't lie. I had a stat earlier in the story stating that the Titans are 8-0 in games decided by 4 points or less over the last 2 seasons, and they're 4-0 this season. That's ability to come through in the clutch, and that's a lot of their identity in their mentality of stopping the run and running the football. It's ugly, but it wins games. So, the spread offenses are great. Yes, I know I see the Eagles running all around with Carson Wentz and the Rams doing the same with Jared Goff. And I know a lot of Titans fans are like, why can't we be that? But every formula doesn't have to have the same match. You don't have to do the same thing to win. I was in Denver and I watched a team with Peyton Manning and Brock Osweiler at quarterback lead the league in interceptions and win the Super Bowl. And it was ugly. Fans were complaining all season, but they weren't complaining when they were at the Super Bowl parade. So I don't necessarily think there's a certain style that wins games. I think that there are different styles that win games. I know different people have different takes, but my take is that you can win if you execute your style the way that you need to go. If you execute your play calling, if you run power 7 times in a row, like Rubisky said he kind of wants to do sometime, if you're successful stopping power, then they can't stop it. I've watched the Saints games a lot, and they run power 7 times in a row, and nobody complains about their play calling because Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram are getting 7 or 8 yards every time they run power. So I don't think, it's as much of a deal as I think it becomes a bigger deal because the Titans have faced some failures in that area. So that's just my take. I got to run in a bit, go out to practice in a couple minutes. So I'll answer a couple of your questions. As always, if I missed them, fire them up at me later this week. I do a written mailbag, so feel free to shoot them. I love doing these video chats with you guys. I'll probably do one from Arizona next week while we're out there on the West Coast trip. So definitely check in for that. And as always, any feedback, any questions you guys have as far as stories, as far as different topics you're interested in, shoot them to me via message or via here. So I'll run through the rest of these and we'll get out of here. Avo, run game, stronger part of the offense. Any thought on struggles occurred? Has the O-line regressed? I think they definitely did take a step back, particularly earlier in the season. There wasn't a lot of push in the interior of the offensive line. And I think that's an area where they still could upgrade in the offseason. But they're coming off a really strong game, 198 yards, kept Marcus relatively clean. So I definitely think they have to keep their game up going forward. Marie's crowd was wild Sunday. Still haven't got my voice back. Yeah, a lot of the Titans, Delaney Walker, Mike Mularkey, Taylor DeWan, all credited the crowd and said that was the wildest crowd that they've heard in the years they were there. And I know that fourth down series where there were 3 straight false starts, a lot of that was directly based on the crowd. So Delaney Walker told me, hey, we need that when we get to the playoffs, not if, when we get to the playoffs. So I definitely think they hear y'all out there in the crowd making noise. Corey Davis, I think that he's still growing. I think I wrote earlier this week that he is a young player who didn't have a lot of training camp time. So he started learning in the fire. And I think a lot of the small elements of the game, jumping from Western Michigan to the Tennessee Titans in the NFL, starting to catch up with him. He's extremely talented. I think he's still going to be a really good player in this league, but he may not be the number one receiver that they want him to be this year. This offseason coming up is going to be very important for him. Who do you think is going to be locking up Fitz? If Logan Ryan plays, he will see a good portion of him. If not, it'll probably be a lot of Adoree on him. That could be a big loss if Logan Ryan, who is in the concussion protocol. I see that question on how is Logan Ryan. He's in the concussion protocol. He won't practice today. And we kind of just got to wait and see if he clears by Saturday or Sunday. Yeah, I mean, you could have that take. You think it's the worst thing for the future. I think having Ken Wisenhunt 2-14, 3-13 may be the worst thing for the Titans' future, rather than having a 9-7 and 8-4 coach. I get that there is some position you don't want to be happy with mediocrity, but I think this team's still on the upswing. And until you reach that plateau, or if you start going dip, that's when you decide, okay, maybe we need to do something different. But they're still going in the upswing, and you're trying to go somewhere you haven't been in a decade. Just ride the wave. Dodd, I haven't seen much of Dodd, honestly. I can't give you much. I haven't seen much of him. He hasn't flashed. Style points, yes. Tight end signing, I think he will help as far as blocking in the run game particularly. And Sims is a more physical player, but Fitz plays a lot from the slot. So it's going to be who plays in the slot. Sims is more of a traditional outside corner. Adoree plays outside most of the time, but I think he has a little bit more quickness to stay with Fitz. I think if Logan was out, you would see a mixture. But I'd feel a little bit more comfortable on Adoree on him most of the time. So thanks, guys. I'm going to run. See you guys next time.